want to cover removing the printhead and flushing it from the Mod 1. First off, there's a couple things you're going to need to do this. You're going to want to get a couple foam swabs, a number 1 Phillips head screwdriver, a pair of needle nose pliers. You're going to want to get your bigger syringe with tubing connected. You do not want to use the small syringe for this. You will damage the printhead. You're also going to need some flushing solution, some HMS, a container to pull flushing solution with the syringe. You're also going to want something that you can push the fluid through the printhead and collect it in, so any kind of container will work. You're also going to want something similar to this Petri dish, and you'll see why later, but you'll need something that you can submerge the nozzle plate in while supporting the rest of the printhead so that it doesn't get submerged in the HMS, and you'll see later why that's important. Another good thing to have is to get something like latex gloves or something to cover the dampers so that they don't leak all over the place. Alright, before removing the printhead, we're going to want to do a couple things. First, remove all your ink bags from the bag connectors. This will shut off the valve and the ink connections and keep the ink from dripping out of the dampers when you remove them from the system. Also, you want to take your platen off, give yourself a little bit of room. Before we get started, you're going to want to use a number 1 Phillips head and grab either your latex gloves, or you can also use tape to tape off the bottom of the dampers. And so first we're going to undock the printhead by hitting the green button once. This will move the carriage unit up and off the capping station. Once it moves, you can freely grab it, move it to the center, and turn the power off to the printer. Next, remove the 3 Phillips head screws that are holding down the damper plate. Set those aside. Next, we're going to want to remove the dampers. We'll pull straight up on one of the cassettes. And then I like to take the latex glove and just wrap this up. Again, helping protect all the electronics that are in here. Alright. So now we can see the top of the printhead. You can see the printhead spikes there. There are 3 Phillips head screws in there. There's 1 here in the top right corner. There's 1 here in the top left corner. And 1 down in the bottom right corner. And you just want to use your number 1 and remove them. Set those aside. Next, we're going to grab our needle nose pliers, and right on this edge here in the front, you're just going to grab it with the needle nose and pull straight up. Alright, so there we have the printhead. And then we're going to gently disconnect the 4 ribbon cables. You can do that by just grabbing them and gently wiggling them out. There you go. Now, you'll also notice there is a white foam pad in there. You want to leave that in there. This protects the printhead circuitry right here on the printhead. When the wiper blade squeegees the ink, it makes sure that no ink gets forced up in there. Alright, so we now have the printhead out of the carriage unit. Go over here. Set it in our Petri dish. Now that we have the printhead out of the carriage unit, we'll go over a little bit of the nomenclature of the printhead. These are the printhead spikes. This is where your dampers seat. This is going to be your nozzle plate. This is the connections for the printhead data cables. As you can see here, we cover these in silicone to protect them from any ink spillages. You still want to be very, very, very careful when handling the printhead. You do not want any liquid getting underneath this nozzle plate assembly. There is circuitry under there. You get ink in there, you can pretty much kiss the printhead goodbye at that point. Alright, so just be very, very careful. I'm going to set this aside into our Petri dish. And the first thing I'm going to do is get some flushing solution. Pour that into my cup. Go ahead and draw some into my syringe with the tubing attached. Again, do not use the smaller syringe. There's too much pressure per square inch, and you do run the risk of blowing out the nozzle plate if you use this one. So again, do not use the little one. Alright, get this out of my way. Get my container. And anytime you have fluid around the printhead, I like to angle the connections up so that if there's any spillage or overrun, it leaks down to the bottom. So first thing I'm going to do is take my tubing and stick it over the spike of the first white channel. Okay. Try to get in here so you can see, and gently push. At first it's going to fight you a little bit, but as you can see, eventually you'll get a waterfall effect. Alright, we'll do each channel. As you can see, at first it'll be a little difficult to get the ink to come through. If there is a bad clog in there, it will be very difficult. If you're finding that you're really having to put pressure on the printhead, don't push too much. What we'll do, I'll show you next what steps you can take to try to soften that clog before you try to push it through. Alright, as you can see there, this printhead is clear. But for the sake of the video, we're going to act like we have one of the channels is clogged. So we'll say, one of our white channels won't push through easily, probably has a pretty bad clog in there. So what we'll do next is what's called back flushing the printhead. So get this out of the way. Take our Petri dish and set our printhead in there. Again, make sure you have some sort of cloth or paper towels around you. Alright, so what we'll do is we'll grab some of the HMS. We will pour it into the Petri dish just until it starts, the nozzle plate itself is submerged. So if you can see that there, we're not going to go much higher than that. Alright, so get rid of my flushing solution from my syringe. We'll take our syringe again with the tubing attached, and we will put it up and over the spike, and we will gently draw back until we see HMS begin to come into the syringe. You want to do this for each spike. It's good practice that while you have the printhead out, you might as well hit every channel. And what we're doing here is we're pulling HMS up into the printhead, and what that HMS will do is any coagulated or thickened ink, it will break it down and make it easier to push it through. Alright, so now that we have we've drawn HMS up through each of the spikes, or each of the channels, what you're going to want to do is let the printhead sit like that for at least 15 minutes. The longer, the better, but no need to really go over 30 minutes. Another thing we'll cover while we have the printhead out is these spikes here on the printhead. We want to keep these clean. What happens is if this ink starts to dry on these spikes, the dampers will not seal properly. They will not sit properly with the spike. So it's best while you have it out, get yourself a foam swab, dip it in either HMS or flushing solution, and clean off these spikes. Just go in there and get all that stuff off of there. See, this yellow channel's got quite a bit of buildup on it. Yeah, just be careful. Take your time. No need to make a mistake and end up having to buy another printhead. They're only getting more expensive by the day. Alright, so I'll let that sit like that for a little bit. Again, let the printhead sit inside with the HMS inside of it for at least 15 minutes. So we've let our printhead sit with the HMS in it for about 20 minutes now. Next what we're going to do is go ahead and try to flush it again. So, grab our flushing solution, pour it into the cup. Let's draw a little flushing solution in there, clear that excess HMS out of there. Go ahead and back flush again. Grab this, the printhead, bring it over again. Remember to angle the printhead or the ribbon cables in an upward fashion, and go ahead and push that out. Now it's a little hard to see here, I'm sure, the waterfall, but basically what you're going to be seeing is 180 nozzles firing down at the same time. And you'll want to look in that waterfall and see if you see any breakages, which suggests there's a clog. Also, you want to make sure that none of the nozzles are firing off to the left or the right, because that would suggest there's a deflection or basically a semi-clog in there. And just push the HMS out of each channel. Again, gentle pressure. If it's really difficult to push through, you want to continue to do the back flush a couple times to try to see if you can soften it. Unfortunately, I find that if you do the back flush 3 times and it still hasn't gotten any better, unfortunately, that printhead's most likely shot. Alright, so we've got it all flushed out. This printhead never had a clog anyway, so what we're going to do is take a dry foam swab and just clean off the top of these spikes, get off that flushing solution that we used earlier to clean them off. And then I'll also take a towel, try to get off a little bit of that excess just by dabbing it. Doesn't have to be perfect, but anything around there. Alright, now what we'll do is gently on the underside of the nozzle plate where you see the excess HMS here, I'll clean around it. So on the silver part, you don't want to touch the nozzle plate. The gold part here, you run the risk of jamming dried ink up into the nozzles, or lint from the paper towel. Alright, so we're ready to put this bad boy back in. Alright, so to put it back in, we're going to make sure that the ribbon cables are facing towards the right of the machine. And you're just going to gently push it back in there. It might fight you a little bit, but it will go back in. And then you want to feel it kind of snap into place. There'll be a little bit of play in there. But to verify that it's in properly, just look underneath and make sure the nozzle plate is level with the bottom of this ramp on the right, and is also level with the sensor on the left. Make sure it's not cocked up to one side, or the back isn't cocked up with the front being level. So just verify that before screwing it in. Alright, so we'll take our 3 screws. Make sure that these 3 screws that you took out go back in. They are a very particular screw, and you will strip the carriage unit if you don't put it back in properly, or the proper screw back in, I mean. And just tighten those screws down to finger tight. No need to bolt them down. Again, you will strip the carriage unit if you do that, and the carriage unit is no fun to replace. Again, finger tight. Alright, we've got those back in. We'll replace the dampers. Take the glove off. Just quickly flip them, set them back in. You want to be very careful when you deal with the white dampers. You don't want to get any white ink on the head interface board here or on the ribbon cable connections. If you do, what you'll want to do is clean off the ribbon cable connections only with alcohol. Alcohol will clean it off, the ink off pretty good, and it will also evaporate quickly. And the dampers will not really snap into place. They kind of just snugly fit on the top of that printhead. I will go ahead and replace my nozzle or my damper plate. There's just as a friendly reminder, make sure that you don't bolt these screws down. They're not there to, this plate's not here really to hold anything down. It's there more for aesthetics reasons. If you push too much pressure on this damper plate, what it will do is lift these dampers up and off the printhead, and you will get leakage from the dampers. You will start to draw air in there, which will eventually clog the printhead and ruin the damper, and then you've got a whole mess on your hands. Alright, now that I've gotten that off, I see a little bit of corrosion, not really corrosion, but a little bit of overspray on the ribbon cables. So what I'm going to do is take a clean paper towel, a little bit of denatured or rubbing alcohol. Go ahead and just clean the ribbon cables off of any ink. Alright, give those ribbon cables, give that alcohol a little bit of time to evaporate off. Alright, now this is the part that seems to get most people, is putting these ribbon cables back in. So, give you the rundown. The two most right-facing cables, they go in the bottom of the head interface board, and the leftmost cables will go into the top 2 connections. So, what I do is I grab the backmost and gently just push them in there. Don't force them in there. If you peel back those pins on the ribbon cables, unfortunately you'll have to replace them, which pretty much means you'll have to replace the printhead. Alright, and then put the bottom 2 in. Gently push on it. Gently push it. We're probably not really seeing this, but there you go. Alright, so now that we've got everything back together, what we're going to do is hook our ink bags back up. Alright, we'll go ahead and repower the machine on. And we'll watch it, make sure that it doesn't error out. Make sure that it goes through its initialization phase properly. And it did. And we successfully just removed the printhead, flushed it out, and we are ready to go.